Welcome to Scott Fox After 9, Pat James and the whole truth. That is Hey Now. If you like that, it is available on Spotify and wherever you get music. And I do happen to know from chatting with Pat the other day, he's got some new music coming out. If it's another Hey Now, I will be thrilled. Welcome to the pod. Today is going to be a quicker one. I got to let you know in advance. I know there's a lot of stuff happening, maybe some stuff you want to hear some context on or a little more about. And I'm going to try and give you as much of that as I can, but I do have to get out of here a little bit early today. There's a big conference happening in Toronto right now called Departure. And this is formerly Canadian Music Week. A lot of industry people come in. There's a lot of seminars and conferences and things like that. So today I'm attending a number of podcast seminars. I will not be late for that meeting. So I'm going to wrap this one up as quickly as I can, but I don't want to sacrifice anything in this episode because, friends, we've got a lot to talk about here. And I want to start off with something that I know is a little irritant for many conservatives that listen to Scott Fox After 9 every single day. A lot of people during the federal election campaign were saying things like, why doesn't Pierre do the Joe Rogan podcast? Pierre Poilievre would win if he goes on the Joe Rogan podcast. I heard it many, many, many times. And then yesterday, Joe Rogan himself weighed in.
I do have to say, I offered to have that Pierre guy come on the podcast.
Really?
He didn't do it. Wouldn't do it. Thought it was too problematic. Or whatever. Jordan told me, I forget what he said, but they were telling him not to do it. Like his advisors were telling him not to do it. Hey, dumbass.
If they can't talk to you and have a conversation hold up, you're not grilling people, you're not attacking people.
Of course not.
This is like a safe, the friend zone type thing. It's like, no. And I heard you talk about Kamala saying you just want to get to know her.
Okay, I'm going to leave it there. Joe Rogan says he offered, and I'm guessing through Jordan Peterson, a chance for Pierre Poilievre to be on the Joe Rogan Experience podcast. Biggest podcast audience in the world, one of the biggest media audiences in the world. And I'm reading a lot of stuff on social media from conservatives who are saying, if he was offered the chance to go on Joe Rogan and said no, whoever said no should be fired. That's the sort of stuff I'm hearing from conservatives. Let me just point out, whoever it was, and I'm going to assume it was Pierre's campaign manager, Jenny Byrne, who made the final decision that Pierre should not do the Joe Rogan podcast. I think that was probably a smart decision. Here's why. If Pierre Poilievre did the Joe Rogan podcast, the whole narrative throughout the campaign that Pierre Poilievre was aligned with Trump and that Pierre Poilievre is a MAGA guy, that would have been put on steroids. That would have been the headline. Look at Pierre doing a Joe Rogan podcast. He's a friend of Trump's. This is terrible. You can't vote for this guy. You got to vote for Mark Carney. That would have been the narrative. I'm also thinking that people who regularly listen to the Joe Rogan Experience were probably going to vote for Pierre anyway. I don't think that despite Joe's massive audience, I don't think that would have built many bridges for Pierre to try and attract new voters into his conservative tent. So that's one of the talking points today. There are some that are quite angry that Pierre Poilievre turned down the opportunity to be on the Joe Rogan Experience. He also turned down the opportunity to be on Scott Fox After 9. I didn't directly reach out and say, hey, Pierre, come on my pod. A lot of conservative influencers did. I didn't. I'm not going to do that. The invite's there. Pierre, if you want to come on the pod, you can come on this one if you want. It doesn't come with the same stigma that Joe Rogan does. And that's not a shot at Joe. That's just a shot at the media coverage of Joe Rogan. I'm going to move on here because yesterday was another historic day. The first meeting at the White House for Prime Minister Mark Carney and President Donald Trump. Going into this one, a lot of people were worried. Oh, no. What if he pulls a Zelensky on him? What if he does to Carney what he did to Zelensky? I mean, I know that was kind of a concern, not really a realistic one, though. And here's why. Zelensky got mouthy in the office. He started arguing with Trump. And I don't think that that's a smart strategy. I think there's other ways that you can handle it. And I'm going to give Mark Carney pretty good marks on how yesterday went. It wasn't a disaster. It wasn't great, but it wasn't bad. How about that? Let me play some of this audio for you, and we'll pause partway through when we need to weigh in here. Let's go.
Mark Carney with us. As you know, just a few days ago, he won a very big election in Canada. And I think I was probably the greatest thing that happened to him, but I can't take vote credit. His party was losing by a lot. and he ended up winning. So I really want to congratulate him. It was probably one of the greatest comebacks in the history of politics, maybe even greater than mine. You know? But I want to just congratulate you. That was a great election, actually. We were watching it with interest, and I think Canada chose a very talented person, a very good person.
I mean, of course, Trump would say that. We picked his guy. His guy won. Trump endorsed Carney. Carney won. And it was a very conciliatory tone from Trump. Going into this, he claimed he didn't even know what Carney wanted to meet about. He played dumb about it. Well, yesterday when Carney was actually there, as we see very often from Donald Trump, he turns a little bit. He turns into a more cordial and friendly guy when he's face to face. Yesterday's meeting went fine. There were a couple of moments where I thought, yikes, this isn't going to play well. And we will get to those. But let's continue breaking down this historic meeting that happened yesterday in Washington.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. I'm on the edge of my seat, actually. But thank you for your hospitality and above all for your leadership. You're a transformational president, focus on the economy with a relentless focus on the American worker, securing your borders, ending the scourge of fentanyl and other opioids, and securing the world. And I've been elected with my colleagues here, with the help of my colleagues here. I'm going to spread the credit to transform Canada with a similar focus on the economy, securing our borders, again on fentanyl. Much greater focus on defense and security, securing the Arctic and developing the Arctic. And you know, the history of Canada and the U.S. is we're stronger when we work together, and there's many opportunities to work together. And I look forward to, addressing some of those issues that we have, but also finding those areas of mutual cooperation so we can go forward.
That's good. Very nice.
All right, let's leave it there for a second. I don't know if that's what liberals signed up for. The elbows up folks. I don't know if they signed up for Mark Carney here, thinking that Mark Carney is going to be the guy who can tame Trump, and then expected to hear him go into the White House and kiss the ring like that. Thank you, above all, for your leadership? Really? Is that really the message we want to put out there to Donald Trump? You've been a transformational president. I mean, those are things that Donald Trump loves to hear. And I believe that part of how you deal with Donald Trump is to butter him up a little bit. And I really don't have a problem per se with Mark Carney saying those things. I just don't think that that's the sentiment of the vast majority of Canadians. I don't think anybody here is really thankful for Donald Trump's leadership because he's put us in a very awkward position. So maybe that was a bit of a red flag for some. I don't think it's a huge deal, but that's one of the moments that some people are talking about. By the way, when I suggest that you got to butter Trump up a little bit, that doesn't mean you have to agree with everything he says. There's many ways to butter him up. You could talk about his golf game. You can talk about how great his hair is or how nice his tan looks. You could talk about a lot of different things to butter him up. The history of the White House, all of these things, his legislative agenda, all different things that you can butter this guy up with. One thing I don't think we should do, though, is capitulate to Trump on the talking points that we are trying to counter with our massive advertising spend in America. Ontario, Alberta, the feds, we've spent a lot of taxpayer dollars advertising in America to try and tell Americans that we're not ripping them off, that this is all a misunderstanding. We want to be their friends and we want to work with them. Well, yesterday, Trump went on a long tirade. I'm going to play it in just a sec. And he didn't get any pushback from Mark Carney. And that, I think, was a missed opportunity. Here's the moment from Donald Trump.
Mr. Prime Minister, I'd like to get your response to this, too. Mr. President, you have said that Canada should become the 51st state.
No. Well, I still believe that, but it takes two to tango, right? But no, I do. I mean, I believe it would be a massive tax cut for the Canadian citizens. You get free military, you get tremendous medical cares and other things. There would be a lot of advantages, but it would be a massive tax cut. And it's also a beautiful, as a real estate developer, I'm a real estate developer at heart. When you get rid of that artificially drawn line, somebody drew that line many years ago with like a ruler, just a straight line right across the top of the country. When you look at that beautiful formation when it's together, I'm a very artistic person, but when I looked at that beauty, I said that's the way it was meant to be. But I do feel it's much better for Canada. But we're not going to be discussing that unless somebody wants to discuss it. I think that there are tremendous benefits to the Canadian citizens, tremendously lower taxes, free military, which honestly we give you essentially anyway because we're protecting Canada if you ever had a problem. But I think it would really be a wonderful marriage because it's two places that get along very well. They like each other a lot.
Well, if I may, as you know from real estate, there are some places that are never for sale.
That's true.
We're sitting in one right now, Buckingham Palace that you visited as well.
That's true.
And having met with the owners of Canada over the course of the campaign last several months, it's not for sale, won't be for sale ever. But the opportunity is in the partnership and what we can build together. And we have done that in the past. And part of that, as the President just said, is with respect to our own security. And my government is committed for a step change in our investment in Canadian security and our partnership. And I'll say this as well, that the President has revitalized international security, revitalized NATO, and us playing our full weight in NATO, and that will be part of it.
Okay, so that's getting a lot of attention. It wasn't the exact clip I wanted to play, but this is worth talking about. Donald Trump goes on in a rambling kind of way about how great it would be for Canadians if we were to join America. He called it a marriage, if you will. He said we'd pay tremendously lower taxes. We would get free military, better health care, all these things that I don't think Canadians really had a chance to have a conversation about the pros and cons. Now, I think in the end, Canadians would decide they'd like to remain a sovereign country anyway, but interesting, Donald Trump went a little further. Mark Carney had a good pushback. You can tell that was a prepared answer. They probably thought long and hard about it on the plane. What are we going to say to Trump when he brings up the 51st state? I thought that was a great response from Mark Carney. Certain things are just not for sale. The White House, Buckingham Palace, Canada. I did think it was an interesting note. Some of the conspiracy theorists are also reading into this when Mark Carney said, I've spent the last little while talking to the owners of Canada. Now, most people would suggest, okay, all right, he was talking to the Canadian people during the election campaign. There's some people reading into that to say that there are actual owners of Canada, and I don't know who those people think the owners are, but apparently it's someone we owe a lot of money to. I've heard speculation about China and stuff, but I honestly don't know much about that theory that Canada is owned. I've also heard that America already owns Canada, and I don't know how much truth there is to that either, so I'm going to leave it, but I'll acknowledge there are some people out there that believe Canada is already owned by America or owned by China. In any case, a good response from Prime Minister Carney, not all that firm, didn't even look at him when he said, and it never will be, but nonetheless, he said it, he got it on the record. What I didn't love, this is the clip I was going to play, is Donald Trump went on this long tirade again about we don't need this, we don't need that. And there wasn't a lot of pushback from the Prime Minister. Here's that clip.
This is a very friendly conversation, but we want to make our own cars. We don't really want cars from Canada. And we put tariffs on cars from Canada, and at a certain point, it won't make economic sense for Canada to build those cars. And we don't want steel from Canada because we're making our own steel, and we're having massive steel plants being built right now as we speak. We really don't want Canadian steel, and we don't want Canadian aluminum and various other things because we want to be able to do it ourselves. And we, because of past thinking of people, we have a tremendous deficit with Canada. In other words, they have a surplus with us, and there's no reason for us to be subsidizing Canada. Canada's a place that will have to be able to take care of itself economically. I assume they can. I will tell you that Trudeau, when I spoke to him, I used to call him Governor Trudeau. I think that probably didn't help his election. But when I spoke to him, I said, so why are we taking your cars? Why are we taking we want to make them ourselves. I mean, I said, and if the price of your cars went up, or if we put a tariff on your cars of 25%, what would that mean to you? He said, that would mean the end of Canada. He actually said that to me. And I said, that's a strange answer, but I understand his answer. But no, I mean, it's hard to justify subsidizing Canada to the tune of maybe $200 billion a year. We protect Canada militarily, and we always will. We're not going to, that's not a money thing. But we always will. But, it's not fair. But why are we subsidizing Canada $200 billion a year, or whatever the number might be? It's a very substantial number. And it's hard for the American taxpayer to say, gee whiz, we love doing that. Thank you very much. We're going to have a very subsidized.
And that is where that part ended. I really feel like Prime Minister Carney had an opportunity there. I certainly understand you don't want to engage with this guy and give him a chance to blow up. But that's an opportunity where that's such a sticking point and an important point in what we're doing here that it deserves to be corrected. When Donald Trump goes on and on about they don't need Canadian steel, they don't need Canadian cars, why are we subsidizing $200 billion? All Prime Minister Carney had to say there yesterday was, listen, we have a disagreement with the American government on that particular topic, and that's part of the reason that we're here. We're here for a face-to-face bilateral meeting so that we can better understand the position of the Americans and work towards a resolution. That's all he had to say. When he didn't challenge that kind of lends the narrative that the American president has been putting out there for months now, that Canada is ripping America off. I really wished that Prime Minister Carney would have seized the opportunity there, but I understand that it's probably a pretty intimidating situation. He's in front of all those cameras right beside the President of the United States, his first trip to the White House, and he's sitting across from Secretary of State Marco Rubio and Vice President J.D. Vance. Would have been good if he'd done it. He didn't do it. Not really the end of the world, but still a missed opportunity there. Now, a couple other things came out of that. President Trump twice in this meeting confirmed America's going to defend Canada if it ever comes to that. He wants us to meet our NATO spending targets, but America is still our ally and our friend. They're going to protect us when push comes to shove. But we've not made any progress on the tariffs, and it seems like the president has no interest in taking those tariffs off right now. Or maybe ever. This is a revenue source for the American people, and if he truly believes he doesn't need our steel, doesn't need our cars, doesn't need our lumber, yada, 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 then we may be living with these tariffs for a very long time. That's in stark contrast to what Prime Minister Carney and Ontario Premier Doug Ford promised. They said, give me your vote, and I will fix this with Donald Trump. I will protect us from Trump. So far, that hasn't happened. But it's only been one meeting, so fair is fair. Let's see where this goes. You got to give the new government a little bit of runway. And speaking of Premier, oh, Freudian slip. Speaking of Premier Doug Ford, I am going to play a little bit of him coming up in just a sec. Before I get to that, there was one more part of this here that I want to play. Without actually naming her, President Trump took a shot at former Finance Minister Chrystia Freeland.
Clarifying something you said on USMCA, is the U.S. prepared to walk away from that pact?
From what pact?
USMCA.
No, it's fine. It's there. It's good. We use it for certain things. It's there. The USMCA is a good deal for everybody. I won't say this about Mark, but I didn't like his predecessor. I didn't like a person that worked. She was terrible, actually. She was a terrible person. And she really hurt that deal very badly because she tried to take advantage of the deal, and she didn't get away with it. You know what I'm talking about. But we had a bad relationship having to do with the fact that we disagreed with the way they viewed the deal, and we ended it. We ended that relationship pretty much. The USMCA is great for all countries. It's good for all countries. We do have a negotiation coming up over the next year or so to adjust it or terminate it.
Wow. Okay, so Donald Trump clearly did not like Justin Trudeau. I'm going to use the word hate. Trump hated Trudeau. And it turns out he didn't like Chrystia Freeland any more than he liked Trudeau. So now I'm wondering, should Chrystia Freeland be left out of cabinet? Mark Carney is currently in the process of picking his cabinet for his new government. Now he knows right from Trump's mouth, Chrystia Freeland was a big problem. He already knew Trudeau was a problem, so was Freeland. Does that make a difference in Carney's cabinet selection? I don't know if it will or won't, but if we're wondering, why are we in the situation we're in right now? Chrystia Freeland did not help, clearly. And Justin Trudeau was the one who put us in this situation. Donald Trump told the story about Mar-a-Lago. We all remember that night in December. Trudeau flew down there. That was where he got the idea for the 51st state. That's why he was calling Justin Trudeau governor. That Justin Trudeau legacy is going to live with us for way too long, and man, is that ever frustrating.
Tariff in Canada, is there anything he could say to you in the course of your meetings with him today that would get you to lift tariffs on Canada?
No,
Why not?
just the way it is.
What's your first thing? If Canadians don't want it, would you respect that?
Sure, I would. But this is not necessarily a one-day deal. This is over a period of time they have to make that decision. Yes, go ahead.
Yeah, if I may. Respectfully, Canadians' view on this is not going to change on the 51st state. Secondly, we are the largest client of the United States in the totality of all the goods. So we are the largest client of the United States. We have a tremendous auto sector between the two of us, and the changes they've made have been helpful. 50% of a car that comes from Canada is American. That's not like anywhere else in the world. And to your question about is there one thing? No, this is a bigger discussion. There are much bigger forces involved, and this will take some time and some discussions, and that's why we're here, to have those discussions, and that is represented by who's sitting around the table.
See, the conflict is, and this is very friendly. We're not. This is not going to be like we had another little blow up with somebody else. That was a much different.
So it seems like they have a relationship. It doesn't seem that this is irreparable. It doesn't seem like tariffs are going to come off anytime soon, but it does seem like our government can have a functioning relationship with the American government. That's all I'm going to do from the White House yesterday, but there was a little bit of follow-up that I'm going to cover here. First off, after the meeting with Prime Minister Carney, President Trump was asked about the meeting. Listen to this.
People with that, but I gave a very long definition this morning in the Oval Office. We're in very, very good shape. This country's never been in better shape, and we're doing great. We were being ripped off by every country in the world virtually, and now we're not being ripped off anymore. It's very simple, very, very simple. As far as calling him Governor Carney, no, I haven't done that yet, and maybe I won't. I did have a lot of fun with Trudeau, but I think this is a big step up. It's a good step for people with.
All right, good. Hey, complimentary words from the president. That's exactly what we want to hear. It does seem like there is a path to trying to create a better relationship with America. Now, Trump is still taunting Canada with the whole never say never. Even though Carney was emphatic that we will never be the 51st state, Trump is not going to give up on that idea. And he did at one point yesterday say there was a lot of things people said I couldn't do, and I did them. Now let's get to a little bit of post-meeting debriefing from Prime Minister Carney. He gave a statement yesterday on the roof of the Canadian Embassy, and I understand why he wanted to do that. It's got the backdrop of the U.S. Capitol. Unfortunately, when you do this, it's outside, and there's a lot of factors you can't control, like police vehicles and first responders going by. I apologize for all the sirens. Hopefully you can hear the Prime Minister and what he was trying to say yesterday.
President Trump and I met today as leaders of two sovereign independent nations. And I want to thank the President and the members of his cabinet that attended for welcoming me and my colleagues to the White House and for our very constructive discussions. I conveyed to the President today what our countries have long proven to be true, that Canada and the United States are stronger when we work together. We can get a better deal for our workers. We can create more opportunities for our businesses. We can build stronger economies across North America when we work together. And really today marked the end of the beginning of a process of the United States and Canada redefining that relationship of working together. The question is how we will cooperate in the future, how we can build an economic and security relationship built on mutual respect, built on common interests, and that delivers transformational benefits to our economies.
I'm going to leave the Prime Minister there because the wind picked up and his notes started blowing everywhere. He seemed a little frustrated, actually. He was a little testy with the media again. And that's something that we've seen a few times now from Prime Minister Carney. I guess the way I want to leave it with the Prime Minister and his trip to Washington is this. They set the bar very low. No expectations for this meeting, and that was met. Almost nothing got done, except for a good face-to-face bilateral exchange. It's good when our Prime Minister and their president sit down face-to-face and start working out details. Now, we don't know exactly what was discussed behind closed doors, but it seems like we're going in the right direction. I'll give the Prime Minister marks for that. What I'm going to be a little critical of is that campaign that we just went through, because I think yesterday proved how dishonest the Mark Carney campaign for Prime Minister was. He said he was the guy who was going to tame Trump. He was not going to bow down. And a lot of people feel, after having watched that yesterday, he did kind of bow down. He did kind of capitulate. He did not confront the president when the president went off on his talking points about we don't need this and we don't need that and blah, blah, blah. Mark Carney seemed quite happy to take all the praise from the president. But when it came down to the question that we all had to decide in the last election that we just went through, Mark Carney's pledge was that Donald Trump wants to break us so America can own us. That was clearly embellishment, campaigning. It's not based in fact or reality. That's not what Donald Trump is trying to do, and I think it's very evident after we saw that meeting yesterday. Good marks for the Prime Minister, Mark, so to speak. I thought he did okay. He handled himself well. There were some things that I'm sure even he would like to have back and do over again, but nonetheless, no damage done. Seems like we're on the right track. Once again, I'm going to continue being as optimistic as I can about these tariffs being lifted and getting back to a normal relationship with America. Now let's switch gears a little bit, because there was a little bit of side drama yesterday involving the First Ministers. Premier Doug Ford yesterday went off script a little bit and started complaining about the president. Listen to this as he was speaking at the Skills Ontario competition.
President Trump's tariffs, this guy drives me nuts. I just get wound up. You know, he's sitting there, he drives it. Here I go off my speech. I always... My team starts getting nervous when I go off the teleprompter. And by the way, I'll tell you one thing. We all have tough jobs, right? We all have tough jobs. The person with the toughest job in this room is the teleprompter operator, because I'm all over the place right now. She's going up and down. And
I'm just going to say it. That was my thing. Off script Doug is back. Off script Doug is back, and I'm here for it. When Doug stays away from the talking points that his people have written for him and he just speaks from the heart, I feel like that's the best version of Doug Ford. Anyway, I interrupted. Let's hear more of what the Premier had to say.
Anyways, you know, what drives me nuts, you see this guy on TV, we don't need Canada. Really? I guess you don't need our high-grade nickel that they use 57% of their nickel to build their military, their aerospace, and manufacturing. Imagine if we never gave them our high-grade nickel. Or my friend Scott Moe out in Saskatchewan, if he cut off the potash, that 87% of the farmers down in the U.S. use Saskatchewan potash. Or the uranium coming from Saskatchewan as well. And you just think of this, uranium gets refined in Port Hope, in your area, David, and then gets shipped down to the U.S., and imagine if they didn't have the uranium. They wouldn't have any nuclear power down there. Or, of course, what would they do if they didn't have our electricity? The 1.5 million homes and businesses in New York and Minnesota and Michigan, they wouldn't have any power. And I talked to all these governors, no matter if it's Republican or Democrat. And even the Republicans, behind closed doors, because they're terrified of their leader, that's pretty crazy in itself, that totally disagree with attacking their closest friends and allies. You know, we always believe in something called the AMCAN Fortress, the American-Canadian Fortress. We put a ring around it. We'd be unstoppable anywhere in the entire world. We'd be the wealthiest, richest two nations in the world and the safest two nations. And, you know, all he's trying to do, and we wish him, I forget about political stripes, by the way. We have a prime minister down there, and he's going to be sitting down, and he's going to give it everything he can.
You know what Mark Carney didn't do yesterday that Mark Carney probably should have done? is take Doug Ford with him. A few minutes ago, I played the clip. Donald Trump went off on his typical speech about we don't need this, we don't need that. That was the kind of response I was hoping for. Maybe in a bit more of a diplomatic way, but that was the kind of response I was hoping for from Canada. We spent millions advertising in America. Our tax dollars spent with American media trying to get across the message that we're still America's best friends and we're not ripping them off. Trump said we were ripping him off right to Carney's face, and Carney didn't argue with him. That one still bugs me a bit. After that, though, the premier was at Queen's Park and he did a little media scrum, and some interesting things came from that.
Premier, what do you make of the meeting between the president and the prime minister? How do you think the prime minister did?
I thought he did really well. It was very productive. He held his own. I'll tell you, it's very obvious that President Trump likes Prime Minister Carney a lot more than he liked Prime Minister Trudeau. So that's the first start. But it's all about building a relationship, and I think this is the first step to something productive.
Towards the end, it looked like it could have gone off the rails as President Trump went on a rant about we don't want your autos, we don't want anything you have, etc. How would you respond in a situation like that where, you know, he's going off on these rants belittling Canada?
Well, you know something, number one, I'd ignore it. And I'd respond just to the public, not necessarily him. We're his largest customer. He keeps talking about a trade deficit, but you take the oil away and they have a $50 billion surplus. Say if he doesn't want anything, I guess he doesn't want the potash that keeps his farmers going, or the uranium to keep his nuclear energy facilities going, or high-grade nickel that keeps the military and aerospace and manufacturing going. The list keeps going on. So I think it's a little bit of rhetoric that he's saying, but I think we're in a much better position now than we were before this meeting.
How so, though? I mean, you hear the president still saying he's not going to relent on these tariffs. How do you say we're not in a better position now?
He says a lot of things, and sometimes he'll change his mind. So let's hope that he changes his mind and really respects our relationship and how we employ. Ontario alone employs 9 million Americans that build a part or a widget, anything for Ontario here. So again, we're their number one customer. They're our number one customer, and we're going to continue building the relationship.
Any thoughts on Alberta separation?
No, I'm not for that whatsoever. We need to stay united. We're so much stronger when we're all sticking together. So hopefully that's never going to happen.
That is Premier Ford commenting on the talk about Alberta separation. Premier Danielle Smith out in Alberta was asked about Premier Ford's comments about Alberta. Let's hear what Premier Smith has to say.
Thank you. Rob Ferguson at the Toronto Star.
Hi, Premier. I'm wondering if you have any retort for Premier Doug Ford today after what he said in Toronto about the possible separatism referendum.
Well, Doug and I have a great friendship. We don't agree on everything. In fact, I think we supported different people in the last federal election.
Whoa.
And so we don't have to agree on everything. But what I will say is we have a constructive conversation at the coffee table. I continue to look forward to having a constructive conversation with him at the coffee table. But he's the Premier of Ontario. I'm the Premier of Alberta. We just have different issues that we have to respond to in our respective jurisdictions.
Danielle Smith basically slapped Doug Ford back. Everybody knows Danielle Smith is conservative and was supporting Pierre Poilievre. Did she just suggest that they might have voted for different people in the last election? In a backhanded kind of way, say that Doug Ford is a liberal? Holy cow. I wonder what their next meeting is going to be like. You know, Doug says he'll work with people from any political stripe. Will he work with conservatives? Because that was an interesting back and forth through the media between Premier Ford and Premier Smith. One thing I'll play from Doug before I go is the topic of the tunnel underneath the 401 in Toronto came up yesterday. This is something that Doug Ford proposed during the last provincial election. And yet when Prime Minister Carney won, Premier Ford sent him a letter saying, we want you to build this tunnel under the 401 because it is a nation-building project. Here's the comments on it from yesterday.
You put the 401 tunnel on the list of the priority projects, the nation-building projects. What if the Prime Minister says no?
Well, if he says no, we continue doing it because we need it. It's costing our economy, tens of billions of dollars every single year, making sure that people and goods can be transferred over from one part of the city to the other. Toronto controls 50% of our GDP. We can't have people held up on highways. The 400 series highways will be at capacity in the next 10 years. So we have to think 50 years down the road. We can't think of just today, and it'll be a large project and a very long process.
So you're saying it's on your list, but if it comes at the expense of the Ring of Fire, as an example, you would prioritize the Ring of Fire?
Well, Ring of Fire is our number one priority over anything, because that's going to generate more revenues. And if we get shovels in the ground, get permits in less than 2 years, and then we can sell those critical minerals to everyone in the world that needs those critical minerals. We can be the wealthiest, richest, most prosperous sub-sovereign nation anywhere in the world if we get those critical minerals out of the ground.
Okay, great words there from Premier Ford. Friends, I've given you the express version of the podcast today. You've got the Coles notes, and I think now you're fairly caught up on everything that happened yesterday. Tomorrow, brand new pod coming your way. Tomorrow, Anna Almeida comes back in studio and joins me because we're going to talk about a couple of different things. But one of the things I want to talk about is crime and punishment. But I don't mean murderers and things like that. I mean the simple stuff that affects all of us. When's the last time you got a speeding ticket? Did you look at that speeding ticket amount and feel like justice was done? This is an appropriate fine. I'll pay this. I've learned my lesson and carry on. Or did you think maybe those fines were a little punitive? Maybe it has something to do with how much money you have and how much money you make. In Finland, when you get a speeding ticket, for example, or you get a fine for anything, the fine is proportionate to your income. We don't do that here in Canada, and I'd like to know why. That's one of the things that we're going to be talking about tomorrow right here on another edition of Scott Fox After 9. Friends, have yourself a great day. If you could, tell a friend about the pod. Every day, brand new content, current events, lifestyle, news, politics. I try and cover it all right here. And if you haven't already, leave me a review. Spotify, Apple Podcast, whatever app you use. 5 stars. I would really, really appreciate that. Thank you, and I will catch you right back here tomorrow. Oh,